Welcome to Mariposa Rising. I'm Dr. Charissa D. Pizarro, an Afro-Latina clinical psychologist, CEO, and nonprofit founder. This is where mental health, culture, and power intersect. We examine how power operates in systems, culture, and within ourselves, and how transformation begins when we reclaim our voice. This is Mariposa Rising, where healing is power. The information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for therapy. So here we are today. This space is where mental health, culture, and power intersect. You might wonder what they have to do with each other, but we'll get into that in a second. This is a space where we talk our truth, and by doing so, we reclaim our power. And as historically marginalized people, we have a tendency to be silenced, which is why I created this podcast so that we can talk our truth through interviews, through self-work, through therapy, through however you choose to do that, so that you can reclaim your power and reclaim your voice. So I'm a clinical psychologist, but this isn't just clinical for me. This is personal because I too carry trauma, and a lot of what we talk about in mental health will be about trauma and intergenerational trauma. By the way, this is our very first episode, and I invite you to provide feedback. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you would like the topics to be. Send us your stories. I will be sharing them. I will also be giving you reflections at the end so we can talk about different things that may be affecting you or not affecting you and why. We'll be having conversations. So a little bit about me. I'm a New Jersey licensed clinical psychologist. I provide individual, group, family therapy. I actually wear many hats. I'm also a play therapist. My focus is trauma, including intergenerational trauma, personal trauma, and how to work through that. I work with children, with adults, and your inner children, for those of us who are adults already, as well as older adults. A little more personal about me, since we're talking about culture, mental health, and power. I'm originally Dominican. I was first gen born in the US, also first gen to go to college, to have a higher education. I received my doctorate degree, and just FYI, a lot of you out there probably already know this if you're in a similar situation. Being a first generation is a lot of pressure. And that pressure that goes with the trauma, there's so much that gets intertwined and just braided in. And we're going to tease all of that apart little by little, one episode at a time. Another reason why I created this podcast was because I didn't have the language. Yes, there was trauma. Yes, it was passed down. You're probably like, Charissa, where did this trauma come from? I'll tell you a little bit about our family's backstory. So like I mentioned, I'm Dominican. My family came to the United States in 1969. It was the late 60s. So it was right after the civil rights movement. There was a lot of migration in the US because immigration ports were being opened to different countries, to varying countries. In my home country, the Dominican Republic, there was the ending of a dictatorship of 31 years. So the era of Trujillo, which was the name of the dictatorship, was coming to an end. The dictator was killed in 1961, overthrown. So that threw our country into a civil war. There was a lot of chaos. After the government tried to get it together, which quite honestly, it's still questionable whether it has it together, but that's a whole other story that I won't get into. They allowed people to leave the country. So immigration wasn't a big thing for us before that, or at least not more, except for government agents and all that. So people started to travel, and my family left in 1969. So my grandfather came first. Just some additional background information. My grandfather was very fair-skinned. He had very light brown hair, closer to blonde. His eyes were greenish, gray, very light. They changed with the sun. So he didn't necessarily look like me. My grandmother, on the other hand, was more stereotypically Dominican. She was darker, her hair was more like mine, etc. So you can imagine who had it easier here. But my grandfather came, he set up everything for the family. He brought our family, which was their children within the marriage, a few years later. He worked, he saved money. Part of our immigrant story, my grandfather just set the path for the kids and his wife to come. So they came over. That was the very early 70s. My mom was about 15. She turned 15 here, so my mom was a young teen. The youngest, my aunt, was about 5, so they started their life in the US. So remember, I said they came from a dictatorship. So already inherently, without being voiced, there was the silence. They were taught to be silent. And in another episode, I'll talk more about the dictatorship. But basically, people, if they spoke, they could die. So talk about extremes. If you spoke about certain things you weren't supposed to speak of, which could be anything really, you could be killed, you could be jailed, you could be beheaded, tortured, the list goes on. Often they left people in the streets to send the message, oh, this person spoke about or didn't speak about so and so, and they were found dead, and sometimes the family couldn't even bury the person as an additional punishment. Again, there was a lot there. But keep in mind that my family carried that with them as they came here to the country, America, the land of dreams, freedom. Again, questionable right now, but we won't get into that. And silence was already there. So by the time I was born in the late 70s, giving away my age here, but it's okay, they were a little more free, let's say my family, but still, you had to respect. If my grandfather was in the room, I couldn't speak. I remember my mom would say, mira muchacha, si los adultos están hablando, tú te callas. Like, if the adults are talking, you shut up. Like, literally. So this was the message sent to me. And I'm thinking that that's the message to a lot of us out there for different reasons, whether it was political, whether it was some other type of instability, whether it was a history of poverty, it was there. And we've been taught to be silent. So part of this will be undoing that. Part of me starting a podcast is my own journey through having my voice out there. And I want to invite you to do the same. I invite you to share your stories, and I will share them here. I will respond myself to your emails. I will respond to your comments. I will do that myself because this is very important to me. This is my life's work. Since I was in college, I started to learn about the dictatorship and about intergenerational trauma. And as I was older, I learned the impact that it had on me. So I became a psychologist also because of a trauma. Being completely vulnerable here with you. My junior year of college, I was in a fire. College storm fire. I was the resident assistant. I was the RA. My friend's younger brother passed away. Three students died in the fire. 3 freshmen. That was extremely traumatic for me. And it was the first time I experienced my own trauma, although I had already been carrying my family's trauma. So it was trauma on top of trauma. And also with that, there comes a lot with that trauma that you're just silenced because you're stunned. There's just so much going on for the person. And it's hard to disentangle. That was the first time I went to therapy. Oh my God, I love my therapist. I went to the University Counseling Center. I was very lucky to get a therapist of color who I feel understood me. And I had such a wonderful experience. I felt so much better. When I went into therapy, I was having nightmares. I was crying all the time. I didn't want to come out of my room. I couldn't sleep at night. Every day at 4:37 a.m. for years, I would wake up. And you know what 4:37 a.m. was? That was the time that the fire alarm went off and we had to leave the building. And I remember somebody saying, it's real, it's real. And every day, because the mind, the nervous system, our bodies are a miraculous creation. And my mind somehow knew 4:37 a.m. every day forever that I needed to wake up because it wasn't safe to be sleeping. And this is how trauma works. Like, we know these things, we don't know why, but I'm here to talk to you about them. So it took a while for that part of it, but I started to feel better in therapy, which I highly recommend therapy for anyone who is considering it, even if it's just to learn more about yourself. And I don't say this because I'm a psychologist, I say it because I went to therapy myself. It's extremely helpful. So let's continue. Where does power come in? When there's a mental health ailment, sometimes we take away our own power by staying quiet. If there's trauma, inherent in trauma, the trauma itself, there's silence. So for example, with sexual abuse, there's a lot of shame surrounding it. For physical abuse, there's also a lot of shame. So the person has shame, they don't want people to know, they're embarrassed, and with that comes silence. And when we're silenced, we're disempowered. And what we want, what we're aiming for, our goal, is power. So let's talk a little more about trauma. Trauma is not just about what happened to you, it's about what you had to go through. And most of the time, this is something we have to go through by ourselves. So back to the fire example. I was in the fire, but when it started, when the alarm went off, I was in my room by myself. When I was going through my symptoms, which I ended up having post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, I couldn't even bring myself to explain that to people until I went to therapy. So my friends and I, trauma is something that's very personal. So people may react differently. So I was shut down. Charissa, you okay? Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm just tired. And you know who I'm talking about. You guys, I know a lot of you out there probably do the same thing. Other people would act out in other ways. Like other people may be drinking, or other people may be overachieving. So they may even do better in class because they're focusing on studying to deflect from what's going on in their minds. By the way, I'm one of those people that overfunctions too. But that semester, I did not do well. And I cut myself some slack because I tend to be very hard on myself. But that semester I think I had like 2 incompletes because I just couldn't do it. And by me saying this, I want you out there, if you are experiencing any concerns with your mental health, any concerns of trauma, whatever type of trauma may be, because trauma could be so many different things. It could be a fire, it could be a car accident, it could be childhood abuse that you survived that you didn't even know was not supposed to happen. You're supposed to be protected. Trauma can be even witnessing something that didn't happen to you, but that happened to someone else. It could be witnessing a murder. It could be witnessing domestic violence. It could be a lot of different things. And again, it's very personal. It depends on you. But when you are from a historically marginalized community, trauma comes with different layers because we have intergenerational trauma. And in my case, not even going as far back as the dictatorship, but even before that, going to the days of slavery, where people of color were used as servants and chattel and like they weren't human at all. And with what's happening now, this is bringing up a lot of different emotions for some of us because of the dehumanizing of certain people from certain cultures. So people that look like me, we're at risk. That's how I feel now. How do you feel? Write it in the comments. Have you experienced a trauma? How did you deal with it? Did you stay silent? Did you scream it out? What would you like to have done? These are thought questions, but please feel free to answer. So trauma, it takes away your power. It could be your body does feel disempowered, like if, for example, in sexual abuse, your body's supposed to be protected and respected. And in cases of sexual abuse, it's not. So power is taken away from you there. And there's a huge loss of control, loss of power, loss of safety. And even, for example, in the case of children may not know that that's wrong, but their body knows that that's wrong. So a child that's being sexually abused may not understand that that's not supposed to be happening, but their body knows that's not supposed to be happening. So your nervous system kicks in. And the nervous system is meant to protect us. It is there to keep us safe. And it knows when we're not safe. So what happens when you grow up with all this trauma that you don't know is trauma? Your body knows, your body keeps track, and then it might come out in, for example, these are significant ways that trauma can show up. So it could be distrust. It could be difficulty in relationships. It could be being too close to someone, feeling that you can't be by yourself, being dependent, being too independent because you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. What we want is to be balanced. But when there's trauma, could tend to be overfunctioning, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe substance abuse, alcohol abuse, or overuse, even if it's not necessarily abuse. It's a very personal thing, I repeat again. So you might be wondering, like, well, Charissa, are you saying that I had trauma? That doesn't mean that everybody had trauma, because it's a term that's thrown around a lot very loosely, which I don't necessarily agree with. But just think of, have you been silenced, and how? Are you from a historically marginalized population? Because that adds a whole other layer. So when we go to therapy, or when you talk with your friends, or listen to a podcast, or do a self-help book, we're peeling layer after layer, like an onion with all those layers. So the first layer, it's the furthest back intergenerational trauma, the systemic issues, the oppression. You come in a few more layers. There's what happened in your family, or what happened in your country of origin, all the way till you get to the center. It's a lot of work, trust me. I've done the work. It is so much work, but it's so worth it. So we're going to share stories. We're going to talk about trauma. I'm going to answer all the questions you have. And since this is our inaugural episode, I invite you to please comment, tell us what you think, and we will have some very deep conversations on so many different topics. When power is taken away from you, What do you do? How do you reclaim it? How do you even know it's being taken away? A lot of people in abusive relationships may not even realize that they're in an abusive relationship. Somebody that's not allowed to have friends, somebody that's currently repeatedly silenced, afraid. Fear is a big one. Fear is a big indicator. And when you're in these situations, you think, oh, I don't have anything to say, or I don't want to say anything, because your body doesn't want to be in cognitive dissonance. So if you're quiet, it makes sense for you to think, oh, I don't have anything to say, or I don't want to say anything. And then your mind is like, okay, that's not a discord there. And a lot of times, silence means survival. Quite literally, as in the case of a dictatorship, metaphorically in other cases, and even more so, for example, domestic violence and sexual violence. It's both. Something I want to mention about trauma. Sometimes we give away our power because we have a history of trauma. And other times we give away our power because it may feel like too much to have it. So we stay silent to avoid conflict, we give away our power to feel safe, and we overfunction to stay in control. But healing is about speaking up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with your literal voice, by the way. It could be writing in a journal. It can be talking to an imaginary, it sounds a little odd, talking to an imaginary friend. But you can also even write to your inner child. It is just being witness to your own past, your own patterns, the things that you have survived. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, that's me, then great job, you made it. There's nothing wrong with you. We can work through this together. It just does take braveness to be able to walk in there and reclaim that voice. And it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight, but you can do it. So this is what mariposa means, right? Mariposa Rising. So butterflies, it's a mariposa in Spanish. And I came up with this because butterflies, when the butterfly is about to emerge from the cocoon, that is the darkest point in its life. And it's almost like a death before it becomes this beautiful, accomplished butterfly. So what are you ready to shed? What are you ready to transform? Are you ready to become the best version of you can be? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if there's anything here that resonates with you. If you think I'm totally off, just let me know. I hope to hear from you.